Shalom. So, I have made videos about this stuff before, and I linked to them below, but this is a perennial I get a lot, and I've been dealing with more since I've been engaging with Muslims, and I used to engage with a lot more, and frankly, I wish I didn't have to engage as much. I used to, and the person who instigated me having this stream is here. Yay! Um, hey, Luke. So Luke asked me about the Roger Waters being on Joe Rogan, and when I was young, I was a very active Zionist, including when I went to college. I would go to APAC conferences and stuff. And as I learned more about the history of Zionism, I became more and more confirmed in my belief that actually having a Jewish state as a Jewish state is not a actually Jewish thing at all. I don't believe that a Jewish religious state that we should mix politics and religion. I think they have always been separate in Judaism. There's always been king versus prophet, Moses versus Aaron. This sort of dichotomy has existed in Judaism since the very beginning, and continues to and should continue to exist, and that there is a dangerous mixing of government with religion in political Zionism. And part of the problem here is the definition of the word Zionism, because I did at some point identify it as an anti-Zionist. I was involved with Satmar. I probably know the Satmar Rebbe's ideas about being opposed to Zionism much better than I would say most people, and even a lot of people within Satmar. If you want to learn Rabbi Yoel Kahn's explanation of the Chabad view towards Zionism, which, contrary to what many people would believe, is actually certainly not Zionist. And that this is the thing: most committed Jews, most actual religious Jews, have stopped calling ourselves anti-Zionists and refer to ourselves as non-Zionists because of all of the problems that I hope I can help clarify here. So Luke asked me about Roger Waters appearing on Joe Rogan, and honestly, it was so infuriating. I couldn't stand it. And I didn't listen to all of it. And if you want to criticize me for that, you can. But I will tell you that one of the most frustrating things as somebody who is Jewish and non-Zionist is the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Because, first of all, when actual anti-Zionism, which is an opposition to a political movement of attaching religious significance to the modern state of Israel and the Zionist movement started by Theodor Herzl. When that gets conflated with anti-Semitism, it, first of all, cheapens anti-Semitism, which is itself a bad thing, because I don't like people saying, "Oh, this is just an this is just a Zionist trick to call something anti-Semitic." And many people will say, and this is basically what Roger Waters was saying, "I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist." And they're calling me anti-Semitic because I am anti-Zionist. And honestly, I don't think he understands that he's being anti-Semitic. I don't think he wants to be anti-Semitic. I think he is just incredibly ignorant and thinks he understands things which he obviously does not. And it is outspoken because he has been captured by people, including the BDS movement. And I'm guessing being called anti-Semitic when he's not doing it for anti-Semitic reasons. He's doing it because he's ignorant. He is incredibly, incredibly ignorant. Like, listening to him, I couldn't get past the first 10 minutes because, I mean, obviously he is somebody who knows nothing about the world, knows nothing about world politics, knows nothing about anything. And so because of that ignorance, he was just saying stupid thing after stupid thing. And when I was, I don't think I'm going to actually play this. I was on EA Dawah. This was a while back. There's a link in the description. And the Zionism issue came up. I kept on saying, please don't make me defend the Zionists. And that's what happens if you start mixing your anti-Zionism with your anti-Semitism. No, these two things don't need to be the same, but you need to have an actual definition of Zionism that you oppose. And that's one of the things that the anti-Semites who hide behind anti-Zionism will not do, is have a and it's very frustrating. For example, I actually like Jimmy Dore, who is very popular, and I don't think he wants to be anti-Semitic at all. I don't think he himself is anti-Semitic, but he has bought into, and I mean, if you look at the comment section on any of his things with regarding Israel, the anti-Semitism is off the charts, and you're not helping when you are being anti-Semitic in your supposed anti-Zionism. And that's basically what happens with BDS. BDS is anti-Semitic. It isn't anti-Zionist. Anti-Zionist as in it's anti-Zionist as in it's anti-Jewish. And basically, I mean, the people who founded it and a lot of the people who support it, like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, these are people who are actually anti-Semitic, and I criticize Israel because I am Jewish. It is a part of my religion. Um, it is involved with my religion, and so uh, it's something. I don't like to see flags in my synagogue. I don't like to see flags in American flags in my synagogue. I don't like to see Israeli flags in my synagogue, and that's one of the reasons I go to Chabad, because as a policy, Chabad does not allow flags into their into the synagogue, and because that's not a Jewish thing. And I don't like to see the state of Israel claim to be a Jewish state. I don't like to see a lot of the things. I have a lot of criticisms of the state of Israel. And there's a lot of us out there. And many of us call ourselves non-Zionist, but many of us have started calling ourselves Zionists. And this is one of the things that happened. Waters talks about having a concert in Israel, and he says the most stupid things, but the most stupid thing he says is he started talking to his audience about how they need to make peace with their neighbors, and suddenly everybody went quiet. And I can absolutely understand that, because guess what? The 60,000 people who came to see him and his claim that none of them were Palestinian, I mean, he's just so ignorant. I mean, the ignorance is just off the charts. And I can just imagine people who belong to Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, the Peace Now movement, were probably in that audience. And they were probably sitting there in stunned silence at the fact that somebody they probably respected so much, who was likely trying to be supportive of them, was so obviously ignorant. So obviously ignorant. And I mean, I would want to get into so many details and educating him and you guys about the details here. But honestly, I could spend hours and hours and hours talking about why the anti-Zionist movement has largely become an anti-Semitic movement, and why things like BDS are very clearly anti-Semitic. And they, in fact, what they are doing is making a confluence of Judaism and Zionism, and it doesn't need to be a confluence, but redefining anti-Zionism, redefining Zionism. So both the Zionists and the anti-Semites are want and Zionism and Judaism to be equivalent. They want these two things to mean the same thing. Judaism is Zionism and Zionism is Judaism. And to too many people, these two are the exact same thing. And if they are both the exact same thing, then that makes me a Zionist. And that's what BDS is doing, right? I don't support the idea of a religious Jewish state, but I support the idea of um, the people who currently live in Israel who are Jewish being alive. It's like, and living under a government that won't kill them. In fact, a government that will. So I say this, and a lot of people are surprised, but they really shouldn't be. The best argument for me for standing with Israel is not the treatment of Jews, it's the treatment of Palestinians. If you, as somebody in the West, cares about the human rights of Palestinians, the last thing you would want is for them to have to live under Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. Because what is absolutely clear to anybody who actually cares is that the human rights of Palestinians are preserved under Israel. Those Muslims and Palestinians who live within the nation of Israel are treated far, far better than the Muslims who live in the West Bank, much less Hamas. And so the anti-Semitic nature of anti-Zionism makes it hard to defend anti-Zionism. So this statement regarding the controversy in Berkeley was signed by a lot of organizations, not officially signed by Chabad, because Chabad tries to stay out of statements. There was a similar statement that some Chabads, I didn't want to get into that statement because it wasn't a well drafted one, but some Chabad student groups did in fact sign on to it, and this one's actually a better one than that one. But so let's read the statement. There's a link below. We, the undersigned Jewish and pro-Israel organizations, are disappointed by recent events at the University of California, Berkeley, in which 9 registered student organizations at Berkeley Law have amended their bylaws to ban any speaker that's any speakers that support Israel or Zionism. A standard Berkeley Law Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, I actually had Professor Chemerinsky at USC, noted would ban both himself and 90% of his Jewish students from speaking at events hosted by these organizations. And the funny thing is, if you know Chemerinsky, he's very left wing, and so when you're forcing Chemerinsky to identify against your supposed movement on behalf of Palestinians, you're alienating powerful allies. You are hurting the cause. And 90% of Jewish students, and frankly, they didn't explain what support of Israel and Zionism means. And of course they don't, because conflating anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism helps the anti-Semites and helps the Zionists. And my definition of Zionism is attaching religious significance to the secular political state of Israel and the movement associated with Theodor Herzl, right? Because if you simply buy Zionism, you simply mean the idea that uh, we have a hope of living in the land of Israel. That's part and parcel of Judaism. That hope of the gathering of the Jewish people in the land of Israel is part and parcel of Judaism. And I will always support the possibility and the right of Jews for religious reasons to immigrate to the land of Israel, to live there as good citizens and good people. And if there is a government there that is a good government, okay, great. But I oppose theocracy in Iran, where I have lived, in the United States, where I live now, and in Israel, where I lived for about a year while I was studying there. And so I do not believe in theocracy, right? So, I mean, I hope for the coming of the Messiah. And when that happens, which is a supernatural event in my view, and we actually have the messianic king who is chosen by God, yeah, that's great. But that's not Bibi Netanyahu and Yosef Kanet and, I mean, whoever the government in Israel is nothing like the Messiah. And so you're not helping at all. Gallup in 2019 found that 95% of American Jews support Israel, and Pew in 2020 indicated that 8 in 10 U.S. Jews say caring about Israel is an essential and important part of what being Jewish means to them. I have friends, I have family, I have rabbis, I have lots of people I care about who live in Israel. And I support their right to live peaceably in the land of Israel. And I similarly support people who want to live in Israel because they are Muslim or because they are of no religion, to peaceably do so. And this is an incredibly complicated issue. And if if you don't know what you're demanding, what exactly are you demanding? Are you demanding that the Jews be thrown into the sea? Because that is what a lot of people who support BDS are in fact demanding. That the Jews be sent back to Europe, which is ridiculous and stupid. Even for the ones who are descended from Europe. But my family was never, well, most of it, well, at least some of it that's living in Israel was never ever ever. So my DNA, when I did my DNA testing, 90%, 80-90% of my DNA was indigenous to the area around Israel, right? So like been living there for like 10,000 years. That's my DNA. Of my ancestors, some 90% are indigenous to the land of Israel. You're going to send me back to Europe, like, or my family who lives in Israel back to Europe? It's ridiculous. And so, unabashed. So let's keep on reading this. Jewish faith and identity for millennia have been anchored by the desire to restore sovereignty in our indigenous homeland, the core idea of Zionism. See, this is the thing. And one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of this statement either. But as opposed to BDS, this is a carefully worded statement which tries very hard to include me under Zionism. Like observing Shabbat and kosher dietary laws, Zionism is vital to the consciousness of many, if not most, Jews. Yeah, I mean, the importance of the land, of the religious significance of the land of Israel and living there, and our hope for an eventual for eventually living there, B'nai Chorin, right, as free peoples, is a messianic hope that is tied into the very structure of Judaism. This is not something that is going away. And it is not something that needs to be a part of the problem of peace in the Middle East. And this is actually, I mean, one thing about Ben Shapiro, a lot of people don't realize is that he, although he was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home and certainly very involved in the Jewish community, his life was far more political and was, and his studies were not necessarily religious. And so, especially when he was younger, and even over the years, I have noticed that his understanding of Judaism and Zionism have grown to the point where I don't hear him making the ridiculous fringe Zionist statements. So there is a fringe religious Zionist I don't even know what to call them, which I oppose, and Yosef, who calls himself a Zionist, opposes. And frankly, I think most of them, even Chazi, who's much more of an gung-ho Zionist, opposes. There is a fringe that is very, very, and honestly, unfortunately, mostly funded by Christians, in Zionist Christians in Judaism, in the United States. They tend to fund the most extreme fringe, and I would say heretical Zionist groups in Israel themselves. And I think this is a huge problem. And if people like BDS, if the anti-Semites, if Muslims who genuinely care about the people in the land of Israel, the Muslims and the Jews there, and frankly, this is one of the mistakes. This is not a religious conflict. I don't think there is any reason why religiously Jews and Muslims can't live very peaceably, as we have many times in history, under rulership that is just and sensible, together. And so it is incredibly frustrating to see the anti-Semitism hiding behind anti-Zionism, and for people to conflate these two things. No, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, although Ben Shapiro sometimes seems, at least he used to say this. I don't know if he says it anymore. And Jordan Peterson has been educating himself and talking, and I would say Jared Kushner and the peace process, which frankly, the peace process in the Middle East has partially been successful, has had some progress by divorcing anti-Semitism from anti-Zionism. And it's not helping. So if you are truly an anti-Zionist who's not an anti-Semite, please, the best thing you can do is call out the anti-Semitism. And yes, Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Zionism was actually leading into anti-Semitism. And that's why when Chief Rabbi Mervis spoke out, it was necessary. That's why you are seeing this, people who would support you, the people who came to Roger Waters, they're the people who want peace, probably exactly like Roger Waters wants. They want to see a world, and I'm sure 90% of them at least were secularists. But if you're a secularist who opposes fringe and crazy political Zionist ideas, or if you're a religious Jew who opposes heretical religious political Zionist ideas, when we're confronted with anti-Semitism, what do you expect me to do? And that's why even Satmar, which is quite stridently anti-Zionist, has had to increasingly detach itself from the anti-Zionist movement. You're not helping. You're not helping. You're hurting the supposed cause here. The bylaw is a vicious attempt to marginalize and stigmatize the Jewish, Israeli, and pro-Israel community, and to normalize the requirement that Zionist Jews hide or alter a fundamental aspect of their identity in order to be fully accepted in certain arenas. This is unabashed anti-Semitism. The fact that 9 student organizations at Berkeley Law have already adopted this view raises a very real concern that they will work to persuade others to do the same. Indeed, such a requirement by even one club is too many. The implication is unambiguous. Berkeley Law is telling its Zionist Jewish students to get used to the idea that they will that there will be certain spaces in which they are not welcome. The UC regions have spoken to this issue with firmness. Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic forms of anti-Zionism, and other forms of discrimination have no place at the University of California. And their instructions to university leaders have been clear. The regions call on university leaders actively to challenge anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination when and wherever they emerge within the university community. And the people who have to stand against the anti-Semitism are the anti-Zionists. And if you consider yourself an actual anti-Zionist, if you actually care about this situation enough to make a statement, you need to understand anti-Semitism well enough to be able to distinguish between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And it's not easy, and that's part of, maybe I will play this. I'm playing it at 1.5 speed. You can so the topic of Zionism came up, and I have to say, at the end, Khalil, I asked Khalil to speak to it, and he's like, I don't know. And this is one of the reasons I respect Khalil so much. And Isa is a nice guy. I just think he was speaking out of ignorance, and what I kept on begging him and the other people was, please don't make me defend the Zionists. And the fact that there was so much anti-Zionism interspersed with what they were saying is what made it difficult for me as a Jew to disagree with them.
Okay. I hope you subscribe to my channel. It's all good. Okay, so all right.
When can we dive into Samuel?
Yeah, I guess now would be the perfect time. I think I beat this to a pulp. Allah is not anti-Semitic. Quran is not anti-Semitic. The Muslims aren't anti-Semitic, although I'm sure there's plenty of anti-Semitic people in the world. But yeah, it is what it is, bro. You know,
I would agree with you that a good Muslim is not anti-Semitic, but having lived in Iran, where my father was sent to jail for 6 months for being a Zionist spy, you know, it's like if they actually believed he was a Zionist spy, you think he would have gone to 6 months in jail?
No. Yeah, that's true. Let me ask you: Are you Zionist? Or do you,
I do not call myself a Zionist. I was a very active anti-Zionist, actually, because I believe it's heretical. But I stopped that because there's so much anti-Semitism that for most people, when they say Zionist, they're just being anti-Semitic.
Would you agree that Zionism is a nationalistic movement?
Political Zionism is heretical to Judaism.
Okay. So is there a different type of
agree with that?
Okay. Is there a different type of Zionism?
Yes. So there's what you might call religious Zionism, which is the belief that God will, when the Messiah comes, give the land of Israel, gather the Jewish people back to the land of Israel, and the temple will be rebuilt. That is a basic belief that is basically everybody agrees to. The problem that I have with Zionism is political Zionism with trying to make it happen through normal means. I think it's completely
human means.
Human means,
yeah. So because Zionists are quite freaking evil. No, they are. Do you see what's happening in Palestine?
That's the thing. It's like this is.
Do you see what's happening in Palestine?
This is why I stopped calling myself an anti-Zionist, and now I call myself a non-Zionist, because I lived in Iran. I've seen what goes on in Israel. I would never wish on anyone, Jew or Muslim, to live under the Palestinian Authority or Hamas. And do I have problems?
Wait. Are you saying? Wait. Are you saying?
See, and this is surprising to him because he doesn't understand what life is like under Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And Roger Waters, it's the same thing. that these are people who are disconnected. And I heard Roger Waters claim that he has seen what things are like in the West Bank, and that was part of the most incredibly frustrating things, because he's like, can you imagine there are separate roads for Jews and Muslims? And he's acting like this is how Israel wants it to be. In Israel proper, there are millions of Muslims who have basically full rights, and to the extent that they don't have full rights, I don't like the fact that Israel is a Jewish state. I don't like the fact that the national anthem of Israel has the word Yehudi, Jew, in it. I don't like the fact that people that there are synagogues that, God have mercy, have special prayers on Israeli Independence Day. I think that Israel could be a secular state that that takes care of its inhabitants, including its Jewish inhabitants, in a very similar way as the United States takes care of all of its inhabitants, and the United Kingdom, which is officially and that's what most people on the left in Israel look towards, is the United Kingdom model, which officially has the Anglican Church, right? And I don't even like that model myself. I think that's going too far, but I think that's an acceptable model. And frankly, it is the model a lot of people do think of Israel as. Which I'm still critical of. But not understanding that, look, and this was something that came up later, because I thought he was making a completely different point. Esau was making a completely different point. He starts asking me about whether I'm allowed to own land, and I thought he was going to ask about something that is an issue in Israel, which is that the Jewish National Fund, which is a public charity, well, it's so many Jews from all around the world for many years contributed vast sums of money to the Jewish National Fund. And the Jewish National Fund bought a lot of land in Israel from people and got actual legal title to it. And it doesn't actually sell land. It will lease land to people, and it gives a preference to Jews who want to live there. And this is problematic. I mean, I see the problems with it, but you have to understand it's also like it's a private charity leasing its land, and the whole reason it exists is to make Jewish life in Israel possible. And I thought that's what he was going to reference. And he starts asking me, well, are Jews allowed to own land? And I started bringing up the fact that actually in most Muslim countries, Jewish ownership of land is at least limited. And in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, I'm not allowed to go to Mecca. Christians and Jews are not allowed into the city of Mecca. I'm not even sure we're allowed into the city of Medina. There are, in the Middle East, there are all kinds of rules like this. And that's actually something I'm hopefully going to get to speak to Haruna about. But not understanding that and going to Israel and being like, oh my God, these things are happening in the West Bank, and thinking it just shows his ignorance. It just shows his incredible ignorance of what is actually happening in these in Israel and in the surrounding countries. And so it's frustrating and it's difficult. And all I can say to people who think that they are being helpful with you're not helping the Palestinians, you're not helping the Jews, you're not helping the anti-Zionist cause when you sign on to anti-Semitic things like BDS. Honestly, this is tiring, and I don't know if any I don't know if continuing to explain is anything more than repetition. If people have comments or want to say things, or even want to come on, then that would be fine. Otherwise, I'm just going to hang around here for another few minutes, and then I will end the broadcast. Ricardo Santa Anna. Hi, I would like to ask you a question. I hate politics at every level, but isn't politics deeply rooted within religion? Choose any, since always. Yes, and this is an incredibly important thing to talk about. So, politics is downstream from religion. In fact, politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from religion. And some of the things that Paul Vanderklay will say include politics is now, religion is forever. Politics is cents, religion is dollars. So I think we have to realize that theology is, in fact, the queen of all sciences. That, in fact, our entire life has to be infused with our religion. And this is something that, like, I think Yoram Hazony has done a good job of making the conservative nationalist case for a he's far more Zionist than I am. And obviously he's trying to make a Zionism that is palatable to Judaism. That's not quite heretical the way that political Zionism has been to up to this point. And so there's, yes, definitely politics must be rooted in religion. It must be subservient to religion. And in being subservient to religion, it must never enter, politics must not be able to allowed to pervert religion. So I am absolutely opposed to political flags in my synagogue. There should be no political flags in my synagogue. And politics must be kept in its correct boundaries. And frankly, I think Abraham Kuyper, his famous quote is, Let me find it because Kuiper. Um, So the quote is, "There's not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine.'" It's a very famous quote, and I would say any religion will, in fact, say something similar. And that's perfectly fine. So Abraham Kuyper, who was a religious man, becoming the prime minister of the Netherlands, I am perfectly happy about that. I would in fact hope that the prime minister of the state of Israel, and if I would like them to. I mean, if a majority are Jewish, and it is done in an okay manner in which it doesn't claim to speak for Judaism, if they want to have a Star of David on their flag the same way that many Christian countries, I don't like the mixing of state and religion in the United Kingdom. I don't find it objectionable. I would certainly prefer a more secular state like that of the United States. And Israel tries to model itself around precisely that UK model. And I hear the argument. I don't think it's necessary. And we can talk about that. But that's very different from theocracy. Because I'll tell you what the biggest practical problem with Zionism is. What do you do if the people living in Israel don't identify as Jews? Right? Let's say something were to happen, and God forbid, I don't even want to talk about what it would take for something like this to happen, but because it would invariably be something drastic and dramatic and emergent. But let's say that suddenly Israel has a Gentile majority, or a Muslim majority, or a Christian majority, or a Buddhist majority, or a majority that's a different religion. What does that mean for Judaism if the state of Israel is an integral part of Judaism? Well, it should mean absolutely nothing. Because just because some mayors in the state of Israel get to choose a chief rabbi, and that's how the chief rabbi gets chosen, is an election by mayors, right? Not rabbis. Rabbis don't choose the chief rabbi. Mayors choose the chief rabbi. And it's like, that doesn't make that person suddenly my religious leader. So yeah, it's an incredibly complex issue, and I just want to stress the importance of recognizing that as long as you allow anti-Zionism to be infected by anti-Semitism, you're hurting the anti-Zionist cause, and that's what anti-Semitic, and BDS is very obviously anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic things that we're seeing have done, and it's causing the Jewish community, very, very few people who get trotted out, as the token, anti-Zionists are actually, high status people in the Jewish community. Because if you're high status in the Jewish community, then you're not going to walk along with anti-Semitism, no matter how anti-Zionist you are. And that is the position Satmar finds itself. Satmar is the largest Hasidic group, in the world, certainly in the United States, and likely even in Israel. And as such, Satmar is very stridently anti-Zionist, and Satmar has had to, in fact, withdraw from the anti-Zionist movement because of the anti-Semitism. You're not helping. Anybody else? Questions? Anybody want to come on? Ricardo says, I will give you an example. I descend from Moranos, but it is almost impossible to return. Here in Portugal, they accept Russian oligarchs with money, but we are denied a chance to return. Well, okay. I will say if yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is a complicated issue as far as the right of return. Frankly, I mean, I don't mind Israel having a right of return for Jews. And I don't mind that because I think there needs to be a freedom of association. And, we're talking about a small country, and people are moving there because of religion. I mean, let's face it, the only reason anybody lives in Israel is that tiny bit of land that is Israel is, in fact, because of the historical value of it. I mean, yeah, and it's kind of funny and weird that way. But and so I don't mind immigration restrictions, right? So when I immigrated to the United States, when I got my certificate of citizenship, or when my parents applied to be naturalized, it asked if you were a communist, right? It's not acceptable in the United States to exclude citizens from who are members of the Communist Party, but it is perfectly acceptable to refuse immigrants who are part of the Communist Party, and that's just U.S. law. And so I don't mind the right of return being for Jews, and the Morano issue. I mean, if the best thing you can do is take an mtDNA test, and frankly, that's how I was able to verify that my grandmother was in fact Jewish, my mom's mom, because we didn't have records and there was some issues. But the I mean, that's another thing. I mean, it's absolutely miraculous that there is mtDNA. But yeah, I mean, these are issues. These are real issues. And I don't know what to tell you other than, yes, these are issues, and it's a very complex situation. And injecting anti-Semitism and riding the horse of anti-Semitism, which is what a lot of people do, is not helping anything. In fact, it's hurting a lot of things. Only return to my belief. I love Portugal like my ancestors. Hope to visit Israel one day and believe in religious Zionism, no political Zionism. I almost live like in secret. You're actually thinking of, yeah, it's, I mean, there's actually, I mean, there's been a huge revival of Hispanic um, people, first of all, finding out that they have Jewish ancestors and converting to Judaism. So yeah, don't know what to tell you. Okay, I am going to end this stream.